lion who knelt before his old friend. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the forest bordering the refugee camp. Dr. Eleanor Matthews paused in her work, wiping beads of sweat from her brow as she organized medical supplies in the makeshift clinic. At 68, she had dedicated her life to healing both humans and animals in crisis zones across the world. This camp, hastily assembled after the regional conflict, had been her home for the past 18 months. A commotion outside drew her attention. Voices raised in alarm, people pointing toward the forest edge. Eleanor stepped outside, squinting against the harsh sunlight. What she saw made her heart skip a beat. A magnificent male lion, his golden mane now matted with blood and dirt, was limping painfully toward the camp perimeter. His once powerful frame appeared gaunt, one shoulder clearly injured, each labored step seeming to cause him tremendous pain. Yet there was a determination in his amber eyes that Eleanor recognized immediately. "Jabari," she whispered, the name escaping her lips before she could even process the impossibility of what she was seeing. Camp security personnel were gathering, some raising rifles cautiously. Eleanor raised her hand. "Wait, don't shoot," she called out, her voice carrying the authority of decades of experience. "I know this lion." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the growing crowd. Eleanor moved forward slowly, her eyes never leaving the wounded animal. 3 years had passed since she had worked at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center in the national park, before war had driven both people and animals from their homes. 3 years since she had nursed a young male lion back to health after poachers had nearly killed him. 3 years since she had whispered to him on the day of his release, "If you're ever alive out there, come back to me." The lion stopped at the edge of the clearing, swaying slightly. His eyes, those intelligent, piercing eyes, found hers across the distance. A soft rumble emanated from his chest. "It's not possible," muttered one of the security officers beside her. "Wild lions don't seek out humans, especially not after years." But Eleanor knew better. In her long career, she had witnessed the extraordinary depths of animal intelligence and memory. The bond between healer and patient transcended species. She had always believed this, even when colleagues dismissed it as sentimental nonsense. "Clear the area," she instructed firmly. "Get me my medical kit, and for heaven's sake, put those guns down." Years of commanding respect in crisis situations lent weight to her words. The crowd reluctantly dispersed, though many watched from a safer distance. Eleanor approached the lion slowly, her heart thundering in her chest despite her outward calm. "Jabari," she called softly, "do you remember me, old friend?" The lion's ears twitched forward at the sound of her voice. He took another painful step toward her, then another. When they were merely 10 feet apart, something extraordinary happened, something Eleanor would remember for the rest of her days. The mighty predator, king of the savannah, slowly, deliberately lowered himself to the ground. With obvious pain and effort, he bent his forelegs in what could only be described as a kneeling position. His head bowed, not in submission, but in a profound gesture of trust. Tears sprang to Eleanor's eyes. "You remembered," she whispered. Behind her, she heard gasps of astonishment. The sight defied everything most people understood about wild animals. But Eleanor knew that the emotional lives of animals ran far deeper than most humans acknowledged. Without hesitation, she closed the distance between them. Kneeling beside the injured lion, she gently examined his wounds. A deep gash ran across his shoulder, infection clearly setting in. His body bore the marks of territorial battles and hard living, but the injury that threatened his life now appeared to be from a snare, one of many left by poachers throughout the region. "I'm going to help you," she promised, her voice breaking, "just like before." What followed were the most challenging weeks of Eleanor's medical career. Creating a safe enclosure near the camp required diplomatic negotiations with camp administrators who thought she had lost her mind. Treating a full-grown male lion with limited veterinary supplies demanded all her ingenuity. Many nights, she slept beside his enclosure, monitoring his fever, cleaning his wounds, coaxing him to eat. Throughout his recovery, the camp's attitudes transformed. Children would gather at a safe distance to watch the lion, who remained gentle and attentive whenever Eleanor was present. The adults, initially frightened and skeptical, began bringing whatever might help extra meat from hunting expeditions, clean water, even makeshift toys crafted from sustainable materials. "He could have died alone in the forest," Eleanor explained to a group of refugees one evening as they watched Jabari resting peacefully in his enclosure. "But he remembered kindness, and he sought it out when he needed it most. There's a lesson in that for all of us." A woman from the group nodded solemnly. "We too have had to learn who to trust with our lives." As weeks passed and Jabari regained his strength, Eleanor found herself contemplating the remarkable circumstances that had brought them together again. In the midst of human conflict, with both their lives uprooted by forces beyond their control, this unexpected reunion had created a space for healing that extended beyond the physical. Camp residents who had endured unspeakable trauma began volunteering to help with Jabari's care. Eleanor watched as their faces softened in his presence, as if the simple act of caring for another living being helped restore something that violence had taken from them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant orange and purple hues, Eleanor sat beside Jabari's enclosure. His recovery was nearly complete, the infection conquered, his strength returning daily. Soon, he would need to return to the wild. "You know," she said softly, running her fingers through his mane as she had done years ago, "most people go their entire lives believing compassion is uniquely human. They're wrong." Jabari's eyes, now clear and bright with restored health, watched her with that same penetrating intelligence. Compassion isn't just an emotion, it's recognition, seeing another's suffering and remembering your own. Crossing the distance between yourself and another, even when that distance seems impossibly wide. She smiled sadly. "You crossed a greater distance than most humans ever dare." 2 days later, camp security reported lion tracks, circling the perimeter, another pride moving through the area. Eleanor knew it was time. As much as the camp had embraced Jabari's presence, he did not belong among humans. His true home was with his own kind. The release was a quiet affair, just before dawn. Eleanor opened the enclosure gate herself, despite offers of help. This moment belonged to them, a lone healer and patient, two souls who had found each other across impossible odds. "Go find your family," she whispered, pressing her forehead briefly against his. "Live well." Jabari lingered for a long moment, his amber eyes holding hers. Then, with a fluid grace that had been absent during his injured arrival, he turned and loped toward the forest. At the edge of the trees, he paused, looking back once more. Eleanor raised her hand in a final farewell. The story of the lion who knelt before his human friend spread through the camp and beyond. Some dismissed it as an exaggeration, a folk tale born from the desperate need for hope in a place defined by loss. Others, particularly those who had witnessed it firsthand, spoke of it as a kind of miracle proof that compassion could bridge even the wildest divides. For Eleanor, the meaning was simpler and more profound. In a world where humans waged wars that displaced both people and wildlife, where cruelty often seemed more common than kindness, Jabari's return was a reminder of an essential truth, that compassion, once given, creates ripples that extend far beyond our understanding. In the months that followed, the refugee camp established a small wildlife protection program, Children who had once known only fear of wild animals became passionate advocates for conservation. Adults who had been focused solely on survival began considering their relationship with the natural world around them. Eleanor herself found renewed purpose in training a new generation of local veterinarians, ensuring her knowledge would continue to serve both the human and animal populations long after her departure. Occasionally, camp residents would report glimpses of a magnificent male lion patrolling the distant ridgeline, as if watching over them. Eleanor never confirmed whether these sightings were truly Jabari or simply stories people needed to believe. She understood the power of such narratives in healing broken spirits. What she knew with certainty was that in one extraordinary moment when a wild lion had knelt before her in a gesture of profound trust, she had witnessed the true meaning of connection. Not dominance or submission, but recognition. The acknowledgement that all living beings are bound together in vulnerability, strength, suffering, and hope. Years later, when asked about her most meaningful encounter in a lifetime of working with animals, Eleanor would smile and say simply, "I once treated a lion who taught me more about humanity than most humans ever could. He showed me that compassion isn't just something we give, it's something we recognize in each other, across all boundaries. And when we truly see it, we kneel before it, because its power is greater than our differences." The refugee camp eventually closed as peace slowly returned to the region. The rehabilitation center was rebuilt, the forest regrew, and somewhere in that recovering ecosystem, the descendants of a lion who remembered kindness continued to roam, carrying in their wild hearts the invisible legacy of a moment when two different worlds acknowledged their shared capacity for compassion. For Eleanor, this was the greatest lesson of all, that in the end, it is not our capacity for violence that defines us, but our capacity to cross impossible distances to heal and be healed. To remember kindness and to return to it when we need it most.